The stars had always guided them, a silent map across the endless dark. But now, in this remote sector of the galaxy, the stars themselves seemed hesitant, flickering, as if uncertain whether they should shine. Fleet Admiral Kale stared at the navigation console aboard the Imperial cruiser Oblivion's Guard, brow furrowed. The warp readings were wrong. Not violently wrong, subtly, impossibly wrong. No storms, no surges, just silence, a vacuum in the immaterium that shouldn't exist. The astropathic projections had gone cold. Psychers whispered of empty echoes where visions should have been. "Report," Cale demanded, his voice cracked against the weight of uncertainty. The communications officer hesitated. "All demonic reconnaissance vanished, my lord. They never reached the planet." Cale turned sharply. "Explain." "Impossible to explain, sir. It's as though the warp itself refuses to comply. The scouts report nothing, then nothing. Gone." The Admiral swallowed, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's artificial temperature. This was more than anomaly. It was absence, a hole in reality where reality should be. Outside the viewports, the void seemed too quiet. Stars wavered, not with light, but with the absence of it, a void in a void. And somewhere in that emptiness, the first hint of the anomaly stirred, unseen but palpable, a presence vast enough to stretch across thought, yet silent enough to suffocate understanding. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Even hardened veterans of the long war felt the weight pressing on their minds. Something was coming, something that had never belonged and would never yield. Cale's fingers clenched the console. Maintain orbit. Prepare for immediate survey. No probe, no preliminary strike, just eyes. We see it first, or we do not see it at all. The order was simple, but the consequence was unknowable. Outside the shields, beyond the sensors, the warp was quiet, too quiet, and in that quiet the anomaly waited, as if aware of their every thought, yet unwilling to reveal itself. The first probes were dispatched, small, unarmed, entirely observational. They should have returned. They did not. Minutes passed like hours. Then one probe signal flickered, distorted, scrambled. Only one single reading remained, a vast undulating energy, neither matter nor spirit, shifting in ways the crew could not comprehend. "Sir," a junior officer whispered, voice trembling, "it's moving, not in space, not in time, but somewhere else, somewhere impossible." Cale's lips pressed into a thin line. "Impossible is all we have left to rely on, Commander. Log every reading. Do not act until further notice, and keep your mind intact while you do it." Silence returned, heavier than before. The anomaly did not attack. It did not speak. It merely existed, a pressure on reason itself. Every officer aboard felt it, the creeping, inescapable certainty that their instruments, their psychers, even their own thoughts were meaningless before this presence. Time began to distort, not visibly, but in the awareness of those observing. Minutes stretched and shrank. Memories became unreliable. Some officers swore they had seen the stars shift, then vanish entirely. Others could not remember their own names. Only the sense of the anomaly remained, silent, immense, and utterly alien. From the observation deck, Cale watched the void. He did not know if it was alive, aware, or simply eternal, only that it had arrived. And in its silence, he realized that the Imperium had never faced anything like it. Nothing they had catalogued, nothing they had destroyed, nothing they had worshipped or feared could compare to the emptiness before them. The anomaly waited, and they were all too aware that waiting for it might already be a mistake. The crew tried to keep themselves occupied, but every glance at the void reminded them of the impossible. Sensors detected nothing conventional, no planets, no warp storms, no gravitational anomalies, but something else lingered, something immense, something patient. Then it began, not with a roar, not with light, but with a whisper in the mind. Tiny at first, just at the edge of perception, a suggestion that reality itself might bend, that thought could be unmade, that sanity was optional. Psychers on the bridge trembled. Some fell to their knees, muttering in languages lost to time. Even the most disciplined officers felt the creeping unease of a presence too vast to define. "Report," Cale barked, but even he felt the words hollow in the air. One of the astropaths, pale and sweating, spoke in a voice that was not quite her own. "It watches. Not the ship, not us. All of it. All existence. It is aware." A shiver ran through the crew. The notion of an entity aware of the immensity of reality itself was not just terrifying, it was incomprehensible. Every calculation, every strategy, every weapon in the Imperium's arsenal suddenly seemed irrelevant. They had never encountered anything beyond the bounds of the warp before, and now they were forced to consider the unimaginable. Suddenly, the console blinked. The anomaly was no longer invisible. Subtle distortions began to ripple through space around the ship. Stars bent, light fractured, gravity wavered, and then in the distance a form, if it could be called that, appeared. A shifting expanse, water-like, dark, yet somehow alive. The anomaly had manifested itself not as a creature in the conventional sense, but as an impossible distortion, a physical echo of something cosmic and eternal. The bridge fell silent. No one dared speak. Cale could only stare. "Distance readings. Impossible," murmured the navigation officer. It's growing larger, faster, yet not moving in any direction." The anomaly's presence pressed against the crew, a weight they could feel in their minds more than in their bodies. Time and memory became fluid. Officers misremembered their own roles. Names, ranks, and even prior battles began to lose meaning. Only the dread remained, a constant, silent pressure that made reality itself feel fragile. Cale clenched his fists. "Prepare for survey teams. We must observe, record, and survive. Nothing else matters." The first observation teams launched, small and unarmed, fully shielded from conventional harm. They approached the anomaly, but sensors failed to register any conventional energy. No heat, no mass, no warp signature, nothing. Yet as the probes neared, readings became chaotic, waves of energy beyond comprehension, metrics that defied mathematics, shapes that existed and did not exist simultaneously. Back on the bridge, psychers began screaming. One fell to the floor, clutching her head, whispering, "It sees everything, it knows everything, and yet it does nothing." Cale looked out at the viewport. The darkness beyond was not empty. It was alive in a way that no human could ever comprehend. It was immense, ancient, indifferent, and the most terrifying part, it did not need to move. Its presence alone was enough to unravel the minds of those who gazed upon it. The Admiral realized with a sickening certainty that this was not an enemy to fight, not a being to conquer. It was a force of existence itself, or rather, a force that existed outside of existence. And yet every instinct in him screamed that the Imperium must respond, that order must assert itself, that humanity must not kneel, even as the void of comprehension began to swallow reason from the minds of every crew member on the Oblivion's guard. The anomaly pulsed faintly, a heartbeat without rhythm, a consciousness without intent, and as it lingered, silent and eternal, the crew understood what they had already begun to fear. They were in the presence of something that could not be catalogued, could not be destroyed, could not be bargained with. It waited, and in its waiting, the first true understanding dawned. The galaxy had never seen, and would never see again, anything like the anomaly without a name.
The sector charts had not included this planet. No Imperial records, no Xenos sightings, no warp echoes, nothing. Yet the Oblivion's Guard orbited a world that should not exist, a vast ocean sphere with clouds so thick they almost hid the surface entirely. The planet's existence was a contradiction in every star chart, an unrecorded anomaly in the meticulously mapped galaxy. Fleet Admiral Kale observed it from the bridge, feeling the same unease that had gripped his crew when the anomaly first revealed itself. This planet was different, not silent in the warp. Its presence vibrated through it, sending ripples of something that was almost like thought, almost like intent. It beckoned, yet remained unknowable. "Prepare the landing teams," Kale ordered. "We need eyes on the surface. No weapons unless absolutely necessary. Observe first, survive second." Landing shuttles descended into the thick clouds. Atmospheric sensors reported nothing familiar. Air density fluctuated unpredictably. Gravity shifted in small, disorienting ways, and magnetic fields seemed alive. Instruments quivered as if the planet itself refused to be measured. The first Space Marines touched down on a jagged shoreline. Their boots sank into sand that was wet, yet oddly solid, like a semi-liquid crystal. The sky above swirled with colors unseen anywhere else in the Imperium. Auroras of impossible hues painted the clouds, moving with a slow deliberation, like the surface itself breathed. "Command, this is Squad Alpha," the leader radioed. "Surface is unsteady. Readings are unreliable. Nothing is stable." Kale frowned. "Describe it in human terms, Sergeant." The reply was hesitant. It changes, sir. Sand, water, air, all shift. Feels like the ground itself is alive. And, sir, there are shapes in the water. Not fish, not Xenos, not anything I can name." Below the waves, enormous forms flickered in and out of existence, creatures whose anatomy defied human logic. Tentacles shimmered into nothingness, eyes appeared and vanished before they could be counted, and shapes melted into the sea like shadows cast on water that had no depth. The Marines raised their bolters instinctively, but the weapons felt inadequate, impotent. Every shot missed, as if reality itself ignored their attacks. For the first time, they realized the planet was not merely a location, it was an intelligence, or at least something aware of them, something observing, waiting, calculating. "Keep moving," Kale's voice crackled through comms. "Do not engage unless threatened. Document everything." As they advanced, memory itself began to betray them. Squad members forgot who they were, what planet they hailed from, the very purpose of their mission. One psyker screamed that the ocean called to him, whispering names that should not exist. Another reached for his helmet, only to realize he did not remember how to put it on. The deeper they moved inland, the terrain changed. Hills rose and fell in impossible geometries. Rivers flowed against gravity,
and trees, if they could be called trees, grew in spirals that looped back upon themselves, their roots entwining with clouds. Even light behaved strangely, bending in arcs that distorted size and distance. At the horizon, massive forms moved beneath the surface of the ocean, briefly visible through the swirling clouds, shapes that seemed to grow, shrink, and multiply simultaneously. The Marines could not comprehend them. Attempts at measurement failed, cameras recorded only static, and psychers collapsed under the strain of witnessing the impossible. Cale observed the readings on the Oblivion's Guard. Instruments flared red, unable to stabilize on any metric. This is not a planet. It's something else, a fragment of something older, something before even the warp was shaped. Meanwhile, the first human explorers set foot in shallow waters near the shore. Every droplet of the ocean seemed to resist their presence, forming intricate patterns in mid-air, reflecting thoughts that were not their own. One Marine touched the water, and in that instant he saw, no, felt millennia pass. Civilizations rise and fall, stars die and are reborn, all in a heartbeat, all indifferent to him. He stumbled back, gasping. "Report, Sergeant." "It's impossible, Admiral," the Marine stammered. "Nothing here obeys the laws of physics, even time. It's fluid, and I think the water watches us." The sky darkened as the clouds thickened. The ocean churned unnaturally, forming peaks that could not exist. And then, faintly, a sound arose, not carried through the air, not through the sensors, but inside the mind itself. A vibration, a resonance that bypassed comprehension, bypassed language. The Marine screamed as the voice whispered, "You are too small. You are nothing." Cale's bridge crew winced. They could hear it too, not through speakers, but in their own thoughts, an invasion without touch, a presence without form. From the surface, the team radioed frantically. "Admiral, the shapes, they're coming closer, not moving in a straight line. They're aware. They know we are here." The Admiral swallowed. "Observation only. Do not provoke it. Stay alive." The unrecorded world stretched before them, vast, incomprehensible, and alive. Every step taken by the landing teams, every probe, every glance at the sea challenged their understanding of existence. Time, memory, physics, sanity, everything bent and warped. And in the depths of the ocean, and beyond the clouds, something waited. A consciousness older than the stars, patient beyond imagination, and utterly indifferent to all who had come to observe. This was no mere world. It was a test, a warning, and a manifestation of a truth that the Imperium had never prepared for. The galaxy contained things that could not be catalogued, could not be conquered, and could not be understood. And the first contact had only just begun. The landing teams pressed onward, their armor scraped and warped by the strange terrain. Every step was a challenge, every breath seemed heavier, as if the atmosphere itself resisted their presence. Instruments failed to give coherent readings, compasses spun in impossible arcs, time felt distorted, minutes stretching into hours, and hours collapsing into instants. "Admiral," one Marine radioed, voice shaking, "the ocean, it's changing. Not tides, not waves. It's forming structures, shapes, cities maybe, alive." Cale's fingers tightened around the console. He knew they could not intervene, not yet. This world was a puzzle the Imperium had no key for. "Document everything," he ordered. "Report every anomaly. Stay alive. Return only when we have data sufficient to warn the Emperor himself." But returning was not so simple. Psychers among the landing teams began convulsing, whispering incomprehensible chants, screaming warnings, and falling silent, staring into the distance as if seeing another dimension overlaid atop their own. One dropped to his knees, clutching the sand-like water beneath him, muttering, "It knows, it sees, it remembers everything." Marine squads attempted to push further inland. Hills twisted impossibly. Rivers flowed uphill. Trees and stones spiraled in geometric patterns that defied Euclidean logic. Even the air felt alive, a subtle pressure that seemed to weigh thoughts, reshaping intentions, erasing certainty. Then the first direct sign of intelligence. Shapes emerged from the ocean, not beasts, not mechanical, but something in between. Semi-solid forms, stretching and bending in ways that no human could survive, seeing twice without shattering mentally. Tentacles with eyes at every joint, fins that melted into vapor, mouths that opened into darkness deeper than space itself. The Marines raised their bolters, but firing was futile. The weapon seemed to pass through the forms, as if reality itself ignored conventional physics. Some attempted psychic attacks, but the anomaly within the water resisted, reflecting the assault, disorienting the psychers, and twisting their minds further. One sergeant screamed, "We can't fight it! Nothing works!" The ocean pulsed, waves crashing without sound, reaching toward the shore yet never touching it in a conventional sense. Time dilated, moments folded onto themselves. One Marine remembered 3 different timelines simultaneously, one where he had died before leaving the shuttle, one where he never existed, and one where he was already lost beneath the impossibly deep waves. Cale's bridge observed all of this through the fleet's long-range sensors. Even from orbit, he could see the world warping itself against human comprehension. Attempts to measure gravitational anomalies, magnetic flux, and warp resonance all failed. The planet, if it could still be called that, rejected classification. And then came the first psychic resonance from the planet itself, not through the warp, not through thought alone, but as if the world spoke directly to every mind, human and psyker alike, a chorus of whispers layered across time and space, saying only one thing: "You do not belong here." The landing teams recoiled, some collapsing, others screaming. One Marine turned to run and found the ground beneath him had shifted, his path swallowed, replaced with water and sand that rose to meet him like fingers. He vanished from sight, leaving only the echoes of his scream behind. Cale realized with grim understanding that no conventional forces could interact with this world. This was not merely a location, it was a cosmic truth, a living paradox, a fragment of something ancient and immense. All attempts to catalog, to measure, or to map the terrain failed. Every instrument, every calculation, every psyker's insight was meaningless. The fleet above remained on high alert. Scouts reported that the anomaly's influence reached beyond the planet itself, warping the nearby warp currents. Travel through the sector became impossible. Warp navigation failed. Even communication between ships in orbit lagged, distorted, or fractured entirely. Cale pressed his hands to the console, eyes wide. This planet, it's a seed, a fragment, a manifestation of the entity itself. We are observing not just a world, but the will of something vast, eternal, and unconcerned with our survival. From the surface, strange forms moved closer to the landing teams, forming patterns that suggested intelligence, communication, but intelligence not bound by human or Xenos logic. Marines saw shapes forming symbols impossible to read, yet somehow comprehensible in their emotional weight, dread, awe, and a sense of utter insignificance. "Admiral," the radio crackled, we cannot stay here. It is reaching into us, into our minds. Every thought is shared." Cale's face was pale. "Withdraw the teams. Immediate extraction. Do not resist. Get them on board the shuttles and retreat to orbit." The teams complied, staggering across the impossible terrain. Some vanished entirely before reaching the shuttles, absorbed by water or sand, or the very air. Those who returned to orbit were changed, haunted, fractured, barely coherent. Kale stared at the planet one last time before giving the order for fleet retreat. This is no mere Exynos world. It is a prelude, a warning, and whatever waits below that ocean waits for more than just us. Above, the ocean world swirled silently, indifferent to their departure. Shapes flickered beneath the clouds, tentacles brushing against the atmosphere, light bending in impossible ways, shadows moving against no source of illumination. And in the deepest waters, unseen and unfathomable, a presence stirred, vast, eternal, and aware. The first encounter was over, but the Imperium had only glimpsed the surface of a reality it could not begin to comprehend. And somewhere deep within the unrecorded world, the entity that would later be called Cthulhu sensed the humans, curious, insignificant, and utterly expendable. The Emperor's fleet had arrived. Ships of every class, from cruisers bristling with turbo-lasers to battleships carrying titanic ordnance, formed a siege ring around the unrecorded world. The Imperium's intent was clear. If this planet could not be catalogued, studied, or ignored, it would be obliterated. Exterminatus was declared. Fleet Admiral Kale stood on the bridge of the flagship, staring at the planet through reinforced viewports. "Open fire," he ordered, his voice steady despite the gnawing uncertainty in his mind. "Show this world the might of the Imperium." The bombardment began. Explosive barrages, incendiary shells, and plasma torpedoes lit the skies. The planet shuddered, mountains split, oceans boiled, storms raged, yet the surface shifted in impossible ways. Waves rose and fell in patterns that defied physics. Valleys reformed, and cities, if they could be called that, twisted like smoke in wind. Below, the Space Marines and survey teams were caught in a maelstrom of impossible phenomena. Bolters and las cannons fired at shapes that were not fully solid, not fully liquid, and certainly not mortal. Every impact seemed effective for a moment, only for the target to reconstitute differently, adapting in ways human minds could not comprehend. "Admiral," radioed Sergeant Valen, We can't hit it. Every strike, every shot, it changes." KL felt the weight of the truth pressing on him. "It is not a creature in the conventional sense," he muttered to himself. "It is the planet itself, the sea itself, alive and aware. Every attack is meaningless." Titans were deployed. Warhound, Reaver, and Warlord-class machines descended from orbit, their massive weapons tearing through the air. Their cannons fired volleys that could level continents, yet each strike was met with the same incomprehensible result. The anomaly reformed, shifted, and endured. Systems failed. Targeting sensors went haywire, as if the very rules of physics were rejecting them. Pilots experienced vertigo and disorientation, some losing their grip on reality entirely. A Reaver Titan, after striking what appeared to be a massive tendril, suddenly found the appendage had extended elsewhere, as though the Titan had never fired. "Withdraw or continue?" KL asked the bridge officers, though the words felt meaningless. There was no victory to choose, no retreat that would undo the futility of their actions. Meanwhile, on the surface, psychers collapsed under the mental strain. One screamed that the sea itself was speaking, not in words, but in concepts too vast and alien for comprehension. Another described glimpsing eons of history, all unfolding simultaneously, and claimed the planet remembered every thought the Imperium had ever had. The bombardment intensified, desperation evident in every command. Exterminatus-level firepower reduced mountains to rubble, incinerated forests, and melted cities, but nothing, not a single wave, tentacle, or shape of the anomaly, was truly destroyed. Instead, the planet shifted and reformed. Where a mountain had crumbled, another rose. Where water had boiled, the ocean reappeared, reshaped and indifferent. KL gritted his teeth. "We are striking nothing," he whispered. The realization was crushing. The Imperium's might, its fleets, its titans, and its psychers, all were irrelevant before the scale of what existed here. The anomaly pulsed, softly, almost imperceptibly, a heartbeat in the cosmic silence, not attacking, not defending, but simply existing, and that existence was enough to warp thought, perception, and reality itself. The first Imperial strike concluded without casualties to the anomaly. Entire fleets had fired, the planet had been battered, yet nothing had truly changed. Only the humans, their psychers, and their titans bore the cost. Mental strain, shattered nerves, and creeping madness spreading like a contagion among the ranks. KL stared at the reports. "No conventional action will succeed," he admitted. "Not firepower, not psychic assault, not even titans. This presence exists beyond our understanding." The first strike had ended, and the Imperium had learned the first and most terrifying lesson of facing Cthulhu. It could not be defeated, contained, or even fully comprehended. All they could do now was watch, wait, and attempt to survive. And somewhere, beneath the dark swirling oceans of the unrecorded world, the anomaly pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging the futility of the Imperium's wrath. On the planet's surface, the Space Marines advanced cautiously. The ground beneath their boots shifted unpredictably, a semi-solid mixture of sand, water, and something else, something that seemed to pulse with thought. Bolters were raised, yet each shot met with only fleeting resistance before the target dissolved, reformed, or vanished entirely. "Sergeant Vallon to command," radioed one of the squads, voice trembling. We can't hit it. Every tentacle, every shadow, it changes before we can even measure it. It's alive, in ways we cannot define." Kale's response crackled over the comms. "Observation only. Document everything. No engagement unless survival dictates." But survival was already compromised. Psychers screamed as the anomaly's influence seeped into their minds. Memories fractured, time bent, and thought itself became unreliable. One Marine recalled 3 different lifetimes simultaneously, each ending in oblivion. Another dropped his weapon, staring at the ocean that seemed to breathe around him. Above, the Titans rumbled across the surface, their massive feet crushing impossible terrain. Warhound, Reaver, and Warlord-class machines fired every weapon system they possessed. Volleys of plasma and melter rounds struck, raising clouds of mist and steam. But the anomaly did not falter. Each strike seemed absorbed, remade, and returned in a form subtly different from before. It adapts," shouted a pilot from within his Titan. "Systems are failing. Targeting is impossible." Kale clenched the console. He could see it, reality bending, the ground warping, the oceans reshaping themselves as if mocking the Imperium's effort. No salvo, no psychic blast, no Titan strike had any lasting effect. Every attack was meaningless. On the shore, the Marine psychers fell to their knees. One muttered in a voice that was not entirely his own. It sees everything, past, present, future, even thought itself. It knows. Another began chanting, trying to repel the influence, only for his voice to fracture into multiple tones, overlapping and incomprehensible. The ocean rose in towering waves, though no wind stirred. Tentacles, shadowed and impossible in size, flickered in and out of existence. Some brushed against the Titan's legs, and the machines quivered as sensors went haywire. Human comprehension failed. Minds teetered on the edge of madness. Fall back to the extraction point, Cale ordered, though even the command felt hollow. Marines vanished, swallowed by waves that shifted between liquid and solid. Titans staggered, some becoming unresponsive as systems overloaded under the anomaly's subtle influence. In orbit, the fleet observed the destruction wrought by its own firepower. Entire continents had been reduced to molten craters, forests, rivers, and cities annihilated. Yet below, the anomaly remained, reshaping itself with quiet indifference. Cale's stomach turned as he reviewed the reports. Nothing they had done had worked. Not firepower, not psychic assault, not Titans. The planet, the anomaly itself, had endured. It had adapted. It had survived. The first Imperial strike ended not with victory, but with a haunting realization: the Imperium could not fight this. No weapons, no fleets, no strategy could defeat what existed outside comprehension. On the shore, the Marine Psychers regrouped, shaken, fractured in mind and spirit. Psychers remained unsteady, some unconscious, others whispering secrets they could not fully remember. The world itself seemed to mock their efforts, waves of water and sand rising and falling without cause, tentacles flickering just beyond perception, and the faintest, slowest pulse beneath it all, an intelligence, vast, eternal, and entirely indifferent. Cale turned away from the viewport, voice low. "This is not a battle we can win. Not today, not ever. We have glimpsed something older than the galaxy itself, something that cannot be destroyed, cannot be catalogued, cannot be understood." The anomaly did not attack, it did not flee, it merely existed, and in doing so, it reshaped everything around it: the ocean, the land, the minds of the Imperium's finest warriors. The first Imperial strike had failed, and with it, the Imperium confronted a terrifying new truth. Somewhere deep beneath the unrecorded world's dark, shifting ocean, the entity that would later be known as Cthulhu stirred, not with anger, not with intent, but with awareness. It had observed the Imperium's attempts, noted their strength, and, if such a word applied, considered them insignificant. The first strike was over, but the war for understanding had only begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Imperial command had resolved. If the first strike had failed, escalation was the only option. Titans, Warhound, Reaver, and Warlord were mobilized in full. Their massive forms blotted out the sky as they strode toward the unrecorded world, each step shaking the ground beneath them. Fleets hovered above, monitoring, ready to provide orbital bombardment if needed, though all knew it might prove as futile as the first strike. "Deploy in formation Delta," Cale ordered. His voice carried calm over the bridge comms, but his eyes betrayed the tension. "All Titans, coordinate your fire. Precision, power, and observation only. Do not underestimate this anomaly." As the Titans advanced across the reshaped terrain, the first signs of cognitive strain became apparent. Sensors flickered, targeting computers fluctuated between impossible coordinates. Even the largest weapons seemed inadequate, their calculations meaningless against a foe that was not simply a creature, but an existence. The first Reaver's plasma cannon fired, scouring the water and sand beneath a rising spire of impossible geometry. The blast struck, vaporizing part of the surface, but the spire reformed immediately, its shape subtly altered, as though learning from the attack. "Status report," Cale barked. "Sir," replied a lieutenant over comms, voice tight, "all targeting systems are unstable. Titans report feedback loops in weapons and sensor arrays. Some pilots are affected mentally. They speak of seeing centuries in an instant and places that do not exist." On the ground, a warhound launched its volley, colossal melt-arounds ripping through the churning ocean. Tentacles flickered and twisted, evading destruction without any discernible pattern. The Reaver followed with kinetic strikes, yet the anomaly adapted, reforming at will, indifferent to force. Marines on the shore attempted flanking maneuvers, but every landscape feature shifted beneath their boots. Rivers redirected themselves, hills twisted, and the sky warped. Psychers screamed, convulsed, and occasionally collapsed entirely, leaving the soldiers to witness shapes that were impossible to describe, flickering in and out of the ocean. "Focus fire," Cale shouted. "Concentrate everything." The Titans unleashed volleys in tandem. Columns of plasma, melta, and laser cannon fire converged on the anomaly. For a heartbeat, a section of the ocean seemed obliterated. Water boiled violently, sand dissolved, and shapes vanished. Then, slowly, inexorably, it reformed. Tentacles emerged in new locations, shapes elongated and multiplied, eyes blinked into existence where none had been before. The ocean itself seemed to pulse with awareness, reflecting the Titan's attacks back in patterns that defied comprehension. One pilot cried out, his voice shaking, "It's learning! Every strike we make, it changes. Nothing is permanent. Nothing works." Cale exhaled slowly, realizing the bitter truth. The mightiest constructs of the Imperium, the Titans, the fleets, the Psychers, were irrelevant. Their attacks were observed, absorbed, and rendered meaningless. The anomaly existed outside their rules, rewriting the physics of the battlefield with silent indifference. Even more unnerving were the effects on human perception. Time seemed to dilate. Memories of past battles, of planets destroyed, of comrades lost, flitted across the minds of those on the ground and in the Titans. Some whispered of lifetimes spent in moments, of futures glimpsed and undone. Insanity brushed at the edges of every consciousness. Cale's hands trembled slightly as he issued the order. "Maintain formation, observe, document, withdraw only if necessary. Do not provoke further. This is something beyond combat." The ocean roared, not with water, but with the pulse of something alive and vast. Tentacles flickered like auroras of thought. Shapes emerged and dissolved, and the ground itself twisted beneath every footstep. The first clash of man against this impossible entity ended not in victory, but in awe, confusion, and creeping terror. Above, orbital sensors recorded anomalies that no databanks could interpret. The planet, or the anomaly, was alive, aware, and immune. Every Titan, every bolter, every psychic projection was met with nullification, reshaping, or total indifference. Cale realized a crushing truth. The Imperium's finest weapons could not touch this presence. All they could do was witness its power, its indifference, and the futility of their struggle. And deep beneath the ocean, beyond the reach of bolter fire or plasma, something stirred, conscious, immense, and eternal, observing the humans with detached awareness, waiting, always waiting. The first Titans had struck, and yet the anomaly remained. The Titans pressed forward, Warhound, Reaver, and Warlord-class machines moved like colossal sentinels across the shifting landscape. Each step fractured the ground, but the terrain reformed behind them, undoing the impression of motion itself. Marines accompanied them cautiously, bolters raised, psychers trembling. Every strike of the Titans was met with the same unyielding response: reshaping, reformation, adaptation. The anomaly did not retreat, did not attack conventionally, and yet its presence was an overwhelming force that bent reality. One warlord fired a full salvo of melta and plasma rounds at a section of the ocean that had risen impossibly above the shore. The waves evaporated, the water vanished, and a towering form of shadow and tentacle erupted in its place. The Titans staggered as targeting systems overloaded, their sensors feeding contradictory data. The Marines attempted flanking maneuvers. Rivers turned back upon themselves, hills twisted, and the sky rippled as if gravity and light had been rewritten. Psychers screamed at visions of impossible geometries, civilizations rising and falling in a heartbeat, and stars forming and collapsing in moments. "Withdraw!" Kale shouted, though he knew it was impossible to simply step back. Every coordinate, every path was altered by the anomaly. To move was to walk through a shifting labyrinth of reality itself. The Titans tried coordinated volleys, concentrating fire on a tentacle that stretched from the ocean like a living tower. For a moment, the appendage seemed to waver, to falter under the immense firepower. Then it reformed, twice as long, twice as intricate, adorned with appendages and shapes unseen anywhere else in the galaxy. Marines watched, helpless, as their weapons passed through forms that were partially solid, partially liquid, and partially impossible to comprehend. The anomaly did not fight, they realized, but existed, and its existence was enough to overwhelm all comprehension and strategy. Psychers collapsed. Bolter fire became ceremonial, a gesture more than a weapon. Titan's targeting systems fed impossible coordinates. Some pilots screamed as the landscape bent perception, showing multiple realities at once. One Reaver pilot spoke in fragmented sentences about eons of time compressed into seconds, while another simply stopped moving, staring at a wave that warped like living smoke. Kale stood on the bridge, hands gripping the console. He spoke into the comms. "Focus on observation. Document everything. No further escalation unless unavoidable. This entity is beyond comprehension." From the depths of the ocean, unseen, the anomaly pulsed. Not a heartbeat, not a movement, but a subtle, incomprehensible awareness. Tentacles brushed the surface. Shapes flickered through clouds. The ocean shifted beneath the Titans, yet not in a way that threatened their lives, only their sanity. The battle raged for hours, subjective hours, as time itself seemed unreliable. Not a single strike permanently harmed the anomaly. Every attempt to shape, to destroy, to dominate was nullified, reflected, or absorbed. Finally, Kale ordered withdrawal. The Titans, staggering, damaged, and mentally strained, began to pull back. Marines and Psychers followed, their minds fragmented by the encounter. The planet remained, its oceans alive, its forms shifting, and its presence absolute. In orbit, the fleet observed the aftermath. Smoke, fire, and vapor rose, but the anomaly endured. Sensors recorded changes that made no sense, energy fluctuations, gravitational distortions, and psychic echoes that left entire squads shaken. Kale realized the bitter truth. The mightiest constructs of the Imperium, the Titans, the fleets, the Psychers, were insignificant. They had confronted something beyond life, beyond death, beyond reality itself. And deep beneath the ocean, far beyond the reach of bolters, plasma, or titans, something ancient and vast stirred, a presence eternal, patient and indifferent, watching the Imperium's attempts, absorbing them, and remaining untouched. The first engagement of man against the impossible had concluded. Victory was impossible. Understanding was futile. Survival was uncertain. And the galaxy had glimpsed the shadow of something far older than it could imagine. Cthulhu. The warp trembled, not with battle, not with prayer, not with the rage of mortals, but with something unfamiliar, vast, and alien. The chaos gods, attuned to the emotions, desires, and psychic currents of the galaxy, felt it immediately. A presence beyond their understanding, a force that existed outside their dominion. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, peered into the currents of fate, seeking patterns, seeking comprehension. He twisted strands of probability, trying to predict, to manipulate, to understand. Yet the visions that came back were incoherent. The anomaly did not conform to causality. It did not bend to the currents of fate. It simply was. Impossible, Tzeentch hissed, claws drumming against the endless void. Nothing conforms, nothing aligns. This being resists all calculation. Khorne, furious at the disruption of his rage-filled dominion, sought confrontation. Armies of demons surged toward the unrecorded world, their weapons blood-forged, their will unbreakable. Yet each strike found nothing tangible. Tentacles and shapes reformed, oceans twisted, demons themselves began unraveling under the weight of incomprehensible existence. Blood angels, demon princes, and lesser horrors alike were driven to retreat or collapse. Even avatars of war, massive incarnations of the god's wrath, found their blows absorbed, reflected, or nullified. Khorne roared in frustration. Victory was meaningless. Slaughter was meaningless. The entity existed beyond rage itself. Slaanesh observed silently, sensing waves of perception and experience unlike any pleasure or pain. Every touch of the anomaly's presence distorted desire, warped attention, and left her avatars disoriented. Nothing she could conjure could predict or control its reactions. Her instruments of seduction and manipulation failed utterly. Nurgle, the Plague Lord, found decay and corruption impotent. His diseases withered before reaching the entity. Microbes dissolved into nothingness, and the smell of rot was absorbed, leaving only a sense of indifference. Life and death alike were irrelevant here. Tzeentch tried again, sending psychic probes, twisting time and causality to reach into the anomaly's essence. The anomaly responded not with attack, but with silence, an awareness so vast that it overwhelmed comprehension, causing demons to unravel, psychers to faint, and even the gods to recoil from the infinite complexity. The Chaos Gods convened, furious and confused. Here was a being they could not dominate, manipulate, or even understand. Their minions shattered, their power projections failed, the warp itself twisted around the presence like water around an immovable stone. Tzeentch finally admitted, voice trembling with both fear and fascination, "This is not part of our domain. We cannot influence it. We cannot contain it. We are irrelevant." Khorne snarled, but even his rage faltered against the alien logic of existence itself. Slaanesh recoiled, recognizing that no pleasure, no pain, no experience could bridge the gulf. Nurgle muttered in resignation, seeing corruption swallowed by something older than gods themselves. The anomaly did not move toward them, did not fight, did not flee. It simply was. Its presence reshaped the warp around the unrecorded world. Currents bent unnaturally, psychic channels fragmented, and the Chaos Gods, masters of the Imperium, found themselves powerless, irrelevant, and unheeded. In the mortal realm, the planet's oceans rose and fell, black tendrils flickered in impossible patterns, and human psychers screamed as the warp shifted in ways they could not survive. The Imperium's fleets remained in orbit, powerless to intervene, observing a reality where the gods themselves were irrelevant. For the first time, the galaxy understood. This was not a threat that could be conquered, not by firepower, not by sorcery, not by the gods themselves. Cthulhu existed, and nothing, not the Imperium, not chaos, not even the warp, could challenge it.
The warp writhed, pulsing with a disturbance that even the most powerful daemons could not endure. Avatars of Khorne roared, swinging massive axes, yet the anomaly responded only with subtle shifts, a tentacle rising, a wave reshaping itself, the ocean itself forming impossible geometries. Every strike that should have caused devastation vanished into nothing, leaving the daemons confused and disoriented. Tzeentch unleashed manipulations of fate, threading strands of causality like weaving a tapestry, but the threads frayed instantly, tangling in patterns too complex for his mind to comprehend. One of his most trusted heralds vanished mid-sentence, folded into a paradox of time and space, emerging minutes later with memories of centuries compressed into moments. Slaanesh's minions tried subtle seduction, psychic manipulation, and infiltration of minds, but their attempts fell flat. The anomaly did not think in emotions, desire, or fear. It was indifferent, unmoved, and unreachable. Each effort left the minions fragmented, whispering nonsense, their sense of self dissolving. Nurgle's plagues, the rot and disease that had shattered countless worlds, disintegrated on contact with the anomaly's presence. Spores, toxins, and contagions vanished as if they had never existed. Nurgle's own avatars began to cough and shudder, unable to perceive a cause for the failure of their designs. Even the Chaos Gods themselves began to feel the subtle pull of something beyond them. Their power, vast though it was, could not bend this entity to their will. The Imperium, once a playground for their influence, twisted and contorted around the anomaly like a storm futilely attacking a mountain. Daemons fell one by one, not slain, but unmade. Their forms unraveled, strands of essence dissolving into nothing, leaving behind only fleeting impressions that could not be understood. Khorne's rage could not stop it. Tzeentch's schemes could not predict it. Slaanesh's manipulations could not touch it. Nurgle's decay could not effect it. From the mortal world below, the effects were equally devastating. Psychers convulsed, space marines dropped their weapons in confusion, and even Titans reported systems errors caused by psychic feedback. Every attack, every attempt to comprehend, only amplified the sense of helplessness. The Chaos Gods convened within the warp, their voices a mixture of fury and incomprehension. "It is beyond us," Tzeentch admitted reluctantly, his voice echoing through the twisting currents of the Imperium. Khorne growled, a low rumble of impotent rage. "Then it is no opponent, it is nothing." But Slaanesh whispered, unnerved, "Not nothing, something older, something greater, something eternal." Nurgle muttered, a mixture of resignation and awe.
We cannot rot this. We cannot break it. We cannot control it. In the material universe, the anomaly remained. Oceans twisted unnaturally, black tentacles flickered, and shapes formed only to dissolve immediately. Humans glimpsed it in fragments, minds fracturing as comprehension failed. The Chaos Gods retreated, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. This was not a battle they could win, not an engagement they could dominate, not a presence they could manipulate. And deep beneath the unrecorded world's dark, turbulent seas, the anomaly pulsed with awareness. It did not rejoice. It did not rage. It simply existed, eternal, indifferent, and beyond the reach of gods and men alike. The galaxy, for the first time, understood a terrifying truth. Some forces are beyond war, beyond control, beyond comprehension. Cthulhu had been noticed, and everything that thought itself powerful felt utterly insignificant. The unrecorded world had become a nexus of dread, observed from multiple angles by the galaxy's most advanced and ruthless minds. Tyrannid bioships hovered silently in orbit, their chitinous hulls gleaming in the dim light of distant stars. The hive mind had dispatched waves of reconnaissance organisms, small semi-ethereal probes designed to analyze, adapt, and report. Yet every probe returned corrupted, twisted, or unrecognizable. The anomaly's presence warped biology itself. Even DNA was rewritten into forms that made no sense. Below, the oceans churned with impossible geometries. Dark tendrils stretched like auroras across the waves, rising and falling with awareness. Tyrannid organisms sent to interact with them disintegrated on contact. Others mutated uncontrollably, fusing tentacles with wings, eyes with claws, and exoskeletons with flowing shapes of impossible color. The hive mind tried to stabilize these mutations, but could not account for the anomaly's constant adaptation. Assimilation impossible, the hive mind projected. Adaptation inadequate, the life form resists. Intelligence incomprehensible. Meanwhile, Necron legions emerged from orbit. Tomb worlds deployed legions of wraiths, Lichguard, and immortals. Their stasis fields, particle nets, and null matrix devices activated, designed to lock even stars into unyielding containment. Yet the anomaly rendered each system useless. Stasis traps collapsed upon contact. Particle beams bent around tentacles that existed in multiple planes, and null matrix devices overloaded, feeding incomprehensible data into the Necron processors. A Triarch Praetorian anchored a massive stasis beam into a rising mass of shadow and water. The beam passed through the anomaly as though through mist. Systems reported full containment, yet sensors confirmed no effect. The anomaly did not fight, it did not retreat, it simply existed, infinite and indifferent. Tyrannids attempted a coordinated assault, unleashing massive swarms with psychic link to hive mind, enhanced by synapse organisms. The anomaly responded by warping reality. Terrain shifted under their feet, oceans swallowed organisms, and tentacles rose from unexpected angles. Swarm after swarm faltered or vanished entirely. Those that survived emerged grotesquely mutated, driven mad by exposure to the anomaly's incomprehensible consciousness. Necron overlords adapted. Quantum disruption fields were deployed, attempting to anchor portions of the anomaly to fixed coordinates in space. Beams intersected, devices synchronized, but the anomaly reformed continuously, nullifying containment. The Necron overlords recalculated, only to find their logic defied. Every equation, every prediction, every plan failed. On the planet's surface, Titans observed the carnage. Warhound and Reaver-class machines reported sensor malfunctions. Titan's targeting systems fed multiple, contradictory coordinates. Bolter teams found that terrain itself bent, rivers running uphill, mountains stretching impossibly. Psychers accompanying both Tyranid and Imperial forces screamed in convulsions, their minds assaulted by impossible geometries and simultaneous temporal loops. Hivemind attempted a new tactic, psychic probing of the anomaly's mind, hoping to adapt its species' evolution instantaneously. The probe was met with psychic backlash, folding synapse organisms into paradoxical states, fracturing collective thought, and causing units to turn against each other in confusion. The Tyranid fleet began withdrawing partially to process these unexplainable mutations. The Necrons were equally frustrated. Attempts to combine stasis fields with quantum nullification only destabilized nearby constructs. Wraiths flickered into non-existence and reappeared in different coordinates, while Imhotep-class overlords debated the impossibility of measuring this presence. Every moment revealed new forms, new adaptations, and new evidence that the anomaly could not be contained or comprehended. Kale, observing from orbit, saw the unrecorded world's oceans twist into forms that resembled impossible cities, forests, and landscapes, yet none were real. Titan's weapons passed through tentacles that stretched across multiple planes simultaneously, leaving both humans and aliens alike in terror. Even the Chaos Gods watched from the edges of the warp, seeing both Tyranid and Necron attempts fail spectacularly. Their expressions were unreadable, but the humans and aliens on the planet sensed the growing futility and despair. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed. The Tyranid swarms continued their futile attempts, the Necron legions recalculated endlessly, and the anomaly remained. Its presence was absolute, immutable, and untouched. Cthulhu had been noticed. It had been studied, and yet it endured, silent and eternal. The battle for comprehension escalated. Tyranid super bioforms, each larger and more grotesque than the last, emerged from the reshaped oceans and shattered continents. They bore twisted adaptations, eyes where wings should be, tendrils that bent through multiple dimensions, and exoskeletons that shimmered with impossible colors. The hive mind attempted to assimilate these forms, but they mutated beyond recognition within moments. Even the psychic links connecting the organisms to the hive mind began to fracture, producing spasms of mental chaos across the fleet. Necron overlords deployed synchronized stasis fields across the planet, linking particle traps with quantum anchors. Immortals marched under beams that should have frozen the anomaly in place, yet the presence remained untouched. Wraiths flickered through reality, appearing and disappearing in impossible patterns, their movements mocking the precision of Necron engineering. Even the most ancient tomb world's calculations were thrown into entropy. As the Tyranids launched a combined psychic-physical assault, the anomaly responded not with counterattack, but with existence itself. Mountains rose and fell, oceans curled into impossible spirals, and the sky shimmered with geometries no mind could comprehend. Swarms of Tyranids fell into loops of madness, attacking phantom threats, mutating uncontrollably and dissolving into shadows that reformed into new horrors. The Necrons attempted to coordinate with the Tyranids, reasoning that combining biological and technological might could overwhelm the anomaly. Yet coordination was impossible. The anomaly reshaped reality to nullify interaction. Bioforms dissolved mid-strike, particle beams twisted into fractals, and psychic feedback caused minor temporal distortions in both fleets. Overlords argued with each other, unable to reconcile the presence with their logic. From orbit, Kael watched in horror as the unrecorded world transformed. Titans staggered, systems failing under contradictory data streams. Psychers screamed as rivers of impossible water rose through mountains. Oceans folded into themselves, and the sky became a shifting labyrinth. Every attempt at offense was rendered meaningless. Every calculation and plan was nullified. Hours, or subjective years, passed. Tyranids retreated partially, hive minds struggling to process phenomena beyond evolution itself. Necron forces disengaged, overlords acknowledging the futility of containment or destruction. Even chaos forces, observing from the edges of the warp, shuddered at the futility. The planet itself seemed aware. The anomaly pulsed through oceans and continents, subtly reshaping terrain, weather, and reality around it. It did not fight. It did not flee. It was. Imperial observers, scattered across orbiting ships, recorded data in stunned silence. Titans returned to orbit, systems malfunctioning, psychers unconscious or in katona. No battle had been won, no strategy had succeeded. The galaxy's most advanced biological and technological minds had been rendered irrelevant. And beneath the dark, turbulent oceans, the anomaly remained eternal. The Tyranids and Necrons, for all their might, had failed. Cthulhu endured. The next escalation loomed, the Ordo Malleus, preparing a weapon so devastating it could erase existence itself. Cthulhu had been confronted. Scholars and warriors alike had studied it, yet it persisted beyond understanding, untouched by all attempts, eternal and indifferent. The Ordo Malleus had never witnessed a threat like this. Every simulation, every psychic reading, every sacred text pointed toward a single, terrifying conclusion. The anomaly could not be destroyed through conventional means. Tyranid fleets had fallen. Necron legions had been nullified. Even chaos demons, creatures of raw emotion and malice, had recoiled in failure. High Inquisitor Kale walked through the grand chamber, its obsidian walls etched with runes older than the Imperium itself. The warp nullification device loomed at the center, a monolith of impossible engineering and arcane power. Psychic conduits entwined the chamber, feeding into crystalline matrices, amplifying energy drawn from both material and immaterium. "Everything else has failed," Kale muttered. His voice echoed, swallowed by the chamber's oppressive darkness. "Now we try the only thing left, the forbidden." The device was a synthesis of science and sorcery, a weapon capable of erasing matter, energy, and even thought itself. Activation required psychic harmony from dozens of inquisitors, reinforced by psychers trained in the darkest rites of the warp. Every mind linked to the device risked obliteration, their consciousnesses folded into the matrix as it drew power. Outside, the unrecorded world writhed. Oceans boiled and rose in impossible waves. Tentacles, dark and immense, stretched toward orbit. Mountains cracked, but not in conventional ways. Geometries bent unnaturally, defying every law of physics. And yet the anomaly did not flee. It pulsed, as if aware of the forthcoming act, waiting with absolute indifference. The first psychers entered the device's psychic matrix. Their minds intertwined, creating a lattice of raw, focused energy. Numbers, calculations, and impossibilities streamed into their consciousness. For a moment, Kale glimpsed through them, witnessing memories and thoughts not of his own mind. Stars exploded, fleets evaporated, cities vanished in seconds. Visions of obliteration and unmaking projected into his perception. In orbit, Imperial fleets, Necron legions, and remaining Tyranid bioships observed. Sensor arrays detected waves of energy bending space and time. Titans reported impossible gravitational fluctuations. Psychers screamed, convulsing under the psychic feedback as reality itself trembled. Even chaos forces paused at the edge of the warp, sensing a power beyond comprehension. Kael's hands shook as he initiated the first phase. A ripple of nullification expanded outward from the planet's surface. Oceans disappeared, continents folded inward, and the atmosphere ignited with bursts of energy that were both visible and invisible. Tyrannid bioforms were instantly reduced to nothingness. Necron constructs flickered and vanished as their stasis fields collapsed. The device's effect reached the warp. Currents twisted and folded. Demonic presences screamed silently in the psychic void. Even the chaos gods recoiled, feeling a ripple of unnatural annihilation that threatened their domains. Yet, beneath the oceans, in the reshaped landscapes, the anomaly endured. Its presence remained intact. Black tendrils that once spanned continents now pulsed through voided spaces, untouchable. It had no eyes, no mouth, no body in the conventional sense, but awareness radiated, infinite and eternal. High Inquisitor Kael, witnessing the devastation, realized the first truth of the forbidden weapon. Destruction alone was insufficient. The anomaly was unaffected. It did not resist. It did not flee. It simply remained. Preparations began for the second phase, a complete erasure of all nearby space, fleets, and warp channels. Kael knew the cost. All minds linked to the device would risk total annihilation. Every Inquisitor, Psyker, and Technician braced, the chamber vibrating with the pressure of forces far beyond mortal comprehension. And the anomaly watched, unshaken, as the universe itself trembled before the ultimate act of the Ordo Malleus.
The second phase commenced. Every psychic conduit, material anchor, and forbidden ritual reached peak resonance. The warp nullification device thrummed with energy, vibrations that seemed to tear at the fabric of the universe itself. Stars in nearby systems flickered, currents of the void twisted in unnatural arcs. High Inquisitor Kael felt the device's full force pressing against his mind. Even with protective wards, visions of total annihilation assaulted him. Fleets evaporating, worlds folding into themselves, bioforms disintegrating in impossible patterns. Psychers linked into the matrix screamed, some fading entirely, their consciousnesses absorbed into the device's power as the psychic lattice strained to contain it. The blast erupted outward. Waves of nullification consumed everything. Tyrannid bioships disintegrated into streams of raw energy. Necron fleets flickered and dissolved as quantum fields unraveled. Titans, orbiting battle stations, and remaining Imperial forces vanished in a single pulse. Even demonic presences in the warp, ancient and powerful, were obliterated as if they had never existed. On the unrecorded world, the terrain folded into impossibility. Oceans boiled, then disappeared entirely. Mountains imploded, valleys twisted into dimensions beyond comprehension. Time fractured locally. Observers witnessed events occurring simultaneously before and after themselves. Every attempt at resistance, every defensive measure was rendered meaningless. Yet through this absolute destruction, the anomaly persisted. Cthulhu's presence remained untouched. Its consciousness, unfathomable and infinite, radiated through the void. Black tendrils, impossible geometries, and waves of incomprehensible awareness endured. It did not move, fight, or flee. It simply was. Kael realized the horrifying truth. The weapon had succeeded in erasing everything else, yet the anomaly remained intact.
Nothing in the galaxy, not even a device designed to unmake existence itself, could touch it. Reality had been reshaped, fleets vanished, planetary matter gone, but Cthulhu endured, eternal and indifferent. Even the warp shifted. Currents recoiled from the epicenter, leaving a psychic void where no thought, no emotion, and no demon could penetrate. Chaos gods felt the echo of the device, recognizing a presence beyond their dominion, a force outside the laws of creation and destruction. Imperial observers, surviving only in fleeting psychic echoes or distant monitoring, recorded nothing but silence. Stars, planets, and fleets had ceased to exist. Only the anomaly remained. The galaxy had witnessed the ultimate power of the Ordo Malleus, and it had failed. High Inquisitor Kale stepped back from the activation matrix, shaken and drained. His mind barely clung to sanity, comprehending the scale of the act. "It cannot be destroyed. Nothing can destroy it," he whispered, knowing that the galaxy would never again approach this anomaly without dread and futility. And so the unrecorded world, fleets, armies, and warp currents were gone. All that remained was Cthulhu, eternal, incomprehensible, and untouched by even the most forbidden weapon ever conceived. The galaxy had learned a single truth. Some beings exist beyond all measures of war, power, and annihilation. Cthulhu remained. Everything else had failed.
The universe fell silent, not merely quiet, but an absence of sound, energy, and movement, a void that stretched beyond the comprehension of any living or dead mind. The forbidden weapon had done what it was designed to do. Everything that could be destroyed was erased. Planets, fleets, armies, daemons, tyrannids, necrons, gone. All that remained was a dark, endless vacuum, punctuated only by a singular, incomprehensible presence. From orbit above the unrecorded world, all that remained of the Imperial monitoring stations were empty voids. Communication arrays no longer received signals. Sensors recorded impossible readings. Distances measured in contradictions. Energy levels simultaneously infinite and zero. And matter that seemed to exist in one location while also being everywhere. Even the concept of navigation became meaningless. High Inquisitor Kale, the few surviving psychers, and distant Imperial observers perceived the horror of true futility. Minds fractured as they realized what had occurred. Not a single entity had survived to oppose the anomaly, yet it remained, untouched. The forbidden weapon had achieved everything it was meant to destroy, and yet had done nothing to the one thing that mattered. On the planet itself, landscapes no longer conformed to physics. Oceans rose and fell in impossible loops. Mountains stretched into dimensions unseen by mortal minds, and skies shimmered with geometries that bent thought itself. Titans, destroyed by the nullification, left craters where their remains should have been, but even these craters bent back upon themselves in impossible arcs. The few psychers who survived described visions of infinite forms and thoughts. Minds that had touched the edge of the warp and the Imperium found themselves unable to discern between memory, perception, and reality. Each observer knew deep in their consciousness that the anomaly was not a force to fight, but a presence to endure. Even the warp itself had shifted. Currents flowed around the anomaly as if respecting a boundary it imposed, leaving a vacuum where daemons could no longer enter. The chaos gods observed, their influence curtailed. Tzeentch could not predict its actions, Khorne could not strike it, Slaanesh could not corrupt it, Nurgle could not decay it. Their domains were irrelevant here.
Distant Tyranid hive fleets, retreating after their failed assaults, encountered changes in the void. Psychic signals failed to transmit, synapse links faltered, and bioforms mutated spontaneously in ways that could not be rationalized. Necron overlords returning from orbit found their calculations meaningless, their stasis fields, containment matrices, and quantum locks useless against the simple fact of Cthulhu's existence. High Inquisitor Kale recorded the observations with trembling hands. He wrote of impossibilities, time behaving non-linearly, distances distorting unpredictably, and a constant sense of being observed by a consciousness beyond comprehension. Every measurement of the anomaly contradicted itself, proving that even the most advanced minds could not grasp its scale or nature. Among the few surviving Imperial forces, madness spread. Hive cities, previously isolated from the planet, received faint psychic echoes of the anomaly's presence. These echoes drove entire populations into ritualistic hysteria, secret cults, and mass delusion. Military command structures collapsed as units refused orders, staring blankly at non-existent horizons. The Emperor's own doctrines of control and faith faltered, proving that belief itself could not shield minds from the existential truth. And yet, Cthulhu did not move. It did not grow. It did not roar or strike. It simply existed. Black tendrils, impossible geometries, and consciousness beyond comprehension radiated from the unrecorded world. The galaxy's history, its fleets, and its wars had been erased, but its presence remained eternal. High Inquisitor Kale, finally unbound from the device, understood the most horrifying truth. No weapon, no strategy, no faction could alter this reality. The universe had been tested, measured, and purged, and still Cthulhu endured. This was not a victory. It was not a loss. It was existence itself, in its most alien, immutable form. And from that dark, silent future, one fact was clear to every mind still capable of thought. The galaxy had witnessed something beyond war, beyond power, beyond the comprehension of gods and mortals alike. The anomaly endured, untouched and incomprehensible, bending reality itself around its presence.
As silence spread across the void, the few surviving observers struggled to comprehend the aftermath. Entire fleets, planets, and even demonic presences had been annihilated. Time and space themselves seemed fractured, as if the universe had taken a breath and held it indefinitely. Yet in the center of this nothingness, the anomaly persisted, absolute and eternal. Kale's mind, though strained to the limits of sanity, registered the consequences. Entire star systems no longer existed in any measurable form. Sensor readings returned paradoxes, signals arriving before they were sent, matter appearing simultaneously in multiple locations. His consciousness battled against the incomprehensible truth. Reality itself was warped around the presence of Cthulhu. Across the galaxy, echoes of the anomaly's existence reached those sensitive to psychic resonance. Hive cities went silent, their psychic networks disrupted. Millions of psychers fell into catatonia or sudden mania, incapable of linking to the warp. The Imperium's communications faltered. Orders could not propagate. Planets drifted, untended, as governance collapsed silently. The Emperor's doctrine of unity and faith was rendered irrelevant by a presence that could not be fought or reasoned with. Tyranid hive minds reeled from the nullification. Synapse links fractured, bioforms mutated in unpredictable ways. Creatures adapted to destruction itself, yet no adaptation could penetrate or harm the anomaly. Even retreat became meaningless as psychic pathways and void currents ceased to function in predictable manners.
Necron overlords returned to find Tomb World's calculations meaningless. Their stasis fields, quantum locks, and technological might had all failed against something beyond logic. Obelisks and monoliths that had once contained the C-10 now lay in ruins, or rather had been erased entirely. Only the anomaly remained. The warp for the first time recognized a boundary. Currents flowed around the region, leaving a void devoid of demonic presence or psychic influence. The Chaos Gods sensed it, and for once their schemes and manipulations were powerless. Tzeentch could not comprehend, Khorne could not strike, Slaanesh could not corrupt, Nurgle could not decay. Their dominions ended at the edge of an incomprehensible presence. Time itself seemed to bend. Observers recorded sequences in which events happened before their causes. Memories overlapped with visions of the future, and reality split into impossible layers. And throughout it all, Cthulhu remained, indifferent, eternal, and absolute. Even the few surviving Imperial forces understood the futility of any action. Battle doctrines, fleet deployments, and military hierarchies were meaningless. Hive cities, unmonitored and unsupported, descended into ritualistic worship of the anomaly. Mass hysteria spread, cults formed, and entire populations lost the ability to distinguish reality from the psychic echoes of the unrecorded world. In orbit, Kale and the last Psykers gazed at what remained. They could see nothing but a void of destruction, and within that void, a presence beyond thought. There was no victory, there was no defeat, only endurance, a presence that survived everything the galaxy had mustered against it. The universe, for the first time, recognized its own insignificance. Every measure of power, Imperial, Tyrannid, Necron, or Chaos, was meaningless before the anomaly. The galaxy had been purged and tested, and yet one entity had remained untouched. High Inquisitor Kale wrote in his final record, hands trembling, "All that we are, all that we fight for, all that exists is nothing before it. We have unleashed the ultimate weapon, and it has failed. We are not the center of the universe. We are not powerful. We are dust. Yet it remains, always." And in the darkness the anomaly pulsed. Black tendrils stretched infinitely. Consciousness radiated endlessly, and geometry defied all comprehension. The galaxy's history, its fleets, its wars, and even the warp itself had been altered irrevocably. Cthulhu endured. The universe, for the first time, recognized its own insignificance. Every measure of power, Imperial, Tyrannid, Necron, or Chaos, was meaningless before the anomaly. The galaxy had been purged and tested, and yet one entity had remained untouched. Everything else had failed. Everything else had vanished, and the anomaly endured, eternal, indifferent, incomprehensible. The galaxy had fallen silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of annihilation and incomprehension. Systems that had once teemed with life now drifted empty, their stars intact, yet their planets and fleets vanished. Hive cities went dark, the psychic echoes of their lost populations lingering only as fractured whispers in the warp. High Inquisitor Kale observed from the edge of a shattered orbiting platform. The forbidden weapon had erased everything that could be erased. Tyrannid hive fleets had been obliterated, Necron tomb worlds had been nullified, and Imperial forces had been reduced to memory and shadow. Chaos currents had recoiled, leaving the gods themselves unsettled and powerless. And yet, at the center of the void, Cthulhu remained. The anomaly had survived the ultimate act of destruction. It did not move, did not consume, and did not roar. Its existence alone warped reality, bending space, time, and thought around its incomprehensible form. The Imperium, in both awe and terror, withdrew. Orders to advance, to reclaim, to study were abandoned. Starships retreated from the vicinity, their crews staring at voids of nothingness that defied reason. Commanders muttered of impossible mathematics and broken sensors, of fleets that vanished before they could fire, of worlds erased without warning. Chaos forces, sensing a being beyond their influence, refrained from entering the region. Tzeentch's schemes faltered, his minions incapable of predicting the anomaly. Khorne's avatars, driven by rage, disintegrated in psychic resistance. Nurgle's diseases could not reach it, Slaanesha's temptations could not touch it. The ruinous powers, gods of war, corruption, and desire, had been rendered irrelevant by existence itself. The warp, long the medium of demons and psychic travel, reorganized around the anomaly. Currents folded into themselves, leaving voids where psychic beings could no longer enter. Navigation became impossible. Even the most experienced astropaths could not chart a course near the anomaly. Signals sent into the region returned paradoxes, arriving before they were sent or never arriving at all. Nearby civilizations, sensing the absence of structure and order, collapsed without firing a shot. Hive cities went dark, worlds once thriving fell into superstition and chaos. Entire star systems fractured under the strain of impossible physics and psychic echoes. Religion, governments, military command, everything failed under the weight of a presence that could not be understood or opposed. Observers described phenomena that no science could explain. Gravity bending sideways, stars appearing simultaneously in multiple locations, entire fleets existing in one moment while never having existed at all. Mortals, Necrons, and even demons alike began to comprehend the true horror. They were insignificant in the presence of an entity that simply was. Cthulhu did not need to fight. There was no battle. There was no conquest. The galaxy's mightiest weapons, fleets, and psychic powers had been expended and failed. What remained was pure existence, unchallenged and eternal. High Inquisitor Kale documented the final observation. We have fought everything we could, destroyed all that we could, yet nothing matters. Nothing can touch it. It is not a god, not a weapon, not a demon. It is existence. It is the wrong existence, and it endures. Around the anomaly, the universe itself adapted. Matter and energy shifted subtly to accommodate the presence. Warp currents bent, star systems drifted, and the very rules of reality flexed to make room for the eternal, incomprehensible presence. Time lost meaning, distance lost meaning, life, war, and thought lost meaning. The galaxy had been irrevocably changed. Imperial records listed lost fleets and dead planets, but all of it seemed trivial in comparison to the existential truth staring back across the void. The warp no longer functioned as before. Psychic navigation was impossible. Chaos influence was halted at the edge of the anomaly. Tyranids and Necrons had been repelled without direct conflict. And through it all, Cthulhu remained, unmoving, unaffected, eternal. Its presence alone was a declaration. Some beings cannot be opposed. Some existences cannot be destroyed. Some horrors are absolute. The galaxy could only watch, powerless and silent. And in that silence, the final lesson was clear. Existence itself had chosen a wrong path, and the universe would never be the same. Cthulhu persisted, absolute and indifferent, a presence
beyond comprehension or opposition.
The galaxy had become a silent witness to the unimaginable. Even light seemed to hesitate near the anomaly, bending in ways that no physics could explain. Entire star systems existed in unstable states, some simultaneously present and absent, some folded into impossible dimensions. Nothing conventional could measure, map, or even perceive the full extent of the anomaly's presence. High Inquisitor Kale drifted in the remnants of an orbital station, his mind teetering on the edge of comprehension. Communications were dead, instruments shattered, and psychic impressions distorted beyond recognition. Yet he could feel it. Cthulhu, the unassailable, eternal presence, permeating every aspect of what remained. The Imperium, once proud and unyielding, had abandoned the sector entirely. Orders for exploration or reoccupation were cancelled, fleets redirected to systems untouched by the anomaly, though even those systems seemed subtly affected. Commanders spoke in hushed tones of areas where navigational charts contradicted themselves, fleets disappeared, and psychic networks went mute. Chaos gods, for all their omnipotence, recoiled. Tzeentch, frustrated beyond measure, could not fathom the anomaly's intentions. Khorne's rage dissolved into impotent frustration. Slaanesh found no pleasure in proximity to the being. Nurgle's plagues withered before it, as though even decay respected boundaries it could not breach. The few surviving psychers recorded the final haunting truth. The anomaly was neither malevolent nor benevolent. It did not act according to any law, whim, or desire. It simply existed. It shaped reality passively, bending matter, energy, and consciousness simply by its presence. Attempts to influence it, to understand it, or to control it were met with immediate failure, leaving only madness in their wake. Entire civilizations near the anomaly collapsed without a single engagement. Hive cities fell silent. Civilian populations disappeared into cult-like hysteria or unexplainable mass delusions. Military installations, starports, and colonies ceased operation. Even technology faltered. Machinery would not function as intended, instruments returned contradictory readings, and weapons fired with unpredictable results. Kale and the remaining psychers bore witness to phenomena that shattered every principle of understanding. Fleets orbiting planets that no longer existed, suns appearing where no stellar bodies should be, and time flowing irregularly, some moments repeating endlessly, others vanishing entirely. The galaxy had become a dreamscape shaped by the presence of the eternal anomaly. And still, Cthulhu remained. It did not consume, attack, or transform. Its presence alone was enough to redefine existence. Black tendrils, impossible geometry, and awareness beyond comprehension radiated infinitely. Reality itself had reorganized to accommodate the being, bending every rule of physics, life, and thought. High Inquisitor Kale finally understood the ultimate horror. The galaxy had witnessed every tool, every fleet, every psychic stratagem, every demon, every weapon, and all of it failed to even touch the anomaly. Victory, defeat, war, peace, none applied here. Existence itself met a singular, immutable presence that could not be altered. In the far reaches of space, distant observers, humans, tyrannids, necrons, and demons alike felt echoes of the anomaly. Unseen, unexplainable, yet undeniably present, it warped thought and perception. Entire star systems trembled under the strain of knowing something eternal existed in their midst. Kale wrote his final report. All we have known, all we have fought, all we have believed is irrelevant before it. The galaxy has been tested, it has been purged, and yet one thing endures, one presence cannot be destroyed, one horror is absolute. Cthulhu remains. The universe itself bends to the inevitability of its being. And so the galaxy waited, silent, fractured, and incomprehensible. All that had once been power, all that had been authority, all that had been meaning was gone. Only one truth remained. The wrong existence endured. Cthulhu remained, eternal, indifferent, incomprehensible, and the galaxy would never be the same.